The blame game is on for Democrats, and lots of people are pointing the finger at Joe Biden. Is that fair? All right, let's talk about it. So let's go through first the number of people in the last 24 to 48 hours who are saying this was essentially Joe Biden's fault. And that starts with former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who you will remember was the catalyst to get Joe Biden out of the race after his disastrous June 27th debate. So Pelosi talked to the New York Times podcast unit, actually, about the race. And let me just read a couple of her quotes. This is Pelosi. Had the president gotten out sooner, there may have been other candidates in the race. The anticipation was that if the president were to step aside, that there would be an open primary. And she went on to say this. And as I say, Kamala may have. I think she would have done well in that and been stronger going forward. But we don't know that. That didn't happen. We live with what happened. And because the president endorsed Kamala Harris immediately, that really made it almost impossible to have a primary at that time. If it had been much earlier, it would have been different. Okay, that's Nancy Pelosi. Then there was Jon Favreau, not that Jon Favreau, the other Jon Favreau, not the actor and director, but the Pod Save America co-founder and former Barack Obama speechwriter. And he said on Friday, quote, Joe Biden's decision to run for president again was a catastrophic mistake. Last piece of evidence, Josh Barrow, who I love, who writes a Substack newsletter called Very Serious that you should check out. Here's what Josh Barrow said in the op-ed in the New York Times, which is called "This is All Biden's Fault." He said, Kamala Harris lost the election this week, but I mostly don't blame her. At least I don't blame her because of anything she did recently. Since she became the unofficial nominee in July, she played a difficult hand about as well as she could have, running a disciplined campaign that sought to reassure Americans about the economic issues that trouble them most in a political environment that was very rough for Democrats and for incumbent parties around the world. Okay, then he goes on to say, but where did that bad hand come from? It was dealt her by two people. President Biden, who produced a governing record she could not effectively defend or run away from, and herself, with all the toxic position taking she did in 2019, generating endless attack ad fodder for Donald Trump. And Mr. Biden even bears blame for Miss Harris's pre-2020 baggage, since he put her on the ticket in full awareness that she was carrying it. That's Josh Barrow. Okay, so those are three pieces of evidence from, I think, three very smart and well-informed observers, two Democrats and Josh Barrow, a journalist of Democratic politics. Is it fair? I think in large part it is. Let me first say, you don't lose as convincingly as Kamala Harris lost. All 7 battleground states went to Trump. Trump's percentage of the vote improved in 48 out of the 50 states. He won. He did better among Black voters. He did way better among Latino voters. He did significantly better among young voters. He did better in urban counties. He did better in rural counties, right? I mean, this was a full-scale, across-the-board win for Donald Trump. So to say it was one thing, I always think is tough. Do I think that Joe Biden bears a significant chunk of the blame? I do. For a lot of the reasons that Pelosi, Josh Barrow, and Jon Favreau talked about. And I think it comes down to this. When Joe Biden ran in 2020, he expressly said, I'm going to be, his word, a bridge to the next generation of Democratic leaders. While he didn't come out and say, I'm only going to run for one term, the expectation was, we're going to put a guy in place here who we think can beat Donald Trump, just given his background and sort of his profile. But this guy is old, right? I mean, Biden was 77 or 78 when he was running, right? So obviously he's going to be in his 80s at the end of his first term. And I think the assumption was, among most Democrats, he probably won't run again. Now, I don't think Biden or his people ever said, like, yes, he's definitely not running. But that was the assumption, right? And then what happened? Well, guess what? Being president is really interesting and fun, and people don't like giving it up voluntarily. So I think what happened was Biden and his inner circle, led by his wife, Jill Biden, convinced him and convinced themselves that he was still the only candidate who could beat Donald Trump. And I still believe this, that Joe Biden did not really believe that Kamala Harris, if he stepped down, he believed Kamala Harris would be the nominee and I think he was right, even if there was an open primary like Nancy Pelosi suggests, I think Kamala Harris probably would have won it. Sitting vice president, African-American woman, hard to beat in a Democratic primary. But I think Biden was convinced that Harris could not beat Trump. Now, that would make you wonder why he picked her in the first place, but regardless. And that, by the way, is sort of Josh Barrow's point. Why did you pick someone who you don't think could win a national election? Anyway, so I think that informed a lot of Biden's decision to run again, was that he thought Harris could not win, and he thought he was the only person who could win and beat Trump. Obviously, June 27th and the debate changed all that, because it became clear in the debate and then in the reporting after the debate that people within sort of Democratic circles in the White House had known that Joe Biden was showing significant signs of slowing mentally and physically while in the White House. In the debate, undeniable disaster. I think it's the most consequential presidential debate we've had in modern American history. There was just no way around the fact that Joe Biden could no longer run. People thought he was too old and was slowing down before the debate, and then after the debate, it wasn't even a conversation. So he is forced out by Pelosi, among others. Barack Obama is in there too. And it goes to Harris because Democrats figure we can't piss off two legs of our base, black voters and women voters. We can't just pass over Kamala Harris because we don't know that she's a good candidate and can win. But Kamala Harris wasn't a great candidate, and she didn't win. So to me, Joe Biden does, as I said, bear some responsibility. Is he the only person? No, absolutely not. Look, Kamala Harris was not a great candidate. She had taken a bunch of positions in 2019 that were way more to the left of than the sort of majority of the country. She tried to scale those positions back. She couldn't. She was not great at defining herself. She focused on democracy and fascism at the end of the campaign when we knew those messages didn't work to sway independent voters and persuadable voters. So I don't think it's just Joe Biden's fault, but I will say that it was, in retrospect, virtually impossible for the sitting vice president of a deeply unpopular president. We didn't even talk about that, but Joe Biden's approval rating was in the 30s. Maybe the low 40s, and a majority of people did not think he had done a good job on immigration and the economy, two of the most important issues for their vote. It was probably impossible for his vice president to win. But guess who picked his vice president? Joe Biden, right? So in the blame pie, I would say 50% Biden, 35% Harris, 15% sort of atmospherics and uncontrollable things. And Trump ran, in retrospect, he knew how to get people to vote for him. So was Biden the only person to blame? No, absolutely not. Does he bear a chunk of the blame, a big chunk? I think he does. Yeah. All right. So as always, 4 things. Number 1, subscribe to this channel if you have not. Daily videos, sometimes even videos on the weekends. So please subscribe. And also, I'm doing more live streams so that so when you get alerted to that, if you're a subscriber, I've posted a new video, I'm going to do a live stream. It just makes it easier to consume my content. Number 2, like this video. Just give it the old thumbs up. Thank you, thumb. Number 3, comment on this video. Am I right? Who's right? Do your blame pie. Out of 100%, who gets blame? How do you do the blame pie? And number 4, tell 10 friends about this channel, okay? Everybody take care. This is my ticket right here. Eric B. and Rakim, 1986, paid in full. I would have voted for them. All right, everybody. Take care of yourselves. Be well.